On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don and I'm a consultant in life sciences. And the overall focus that I have is that I streamline companies' broken processes and help them with inefficiencies so that their revenue is more profitable. The types of companies that I typically help are pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and biotech companies. Typical things that we do for companies would be things like value stream mapping, planning and facilitating improvement events, and then also, helping with things like technology implementation or reorganization inside of the organization, and even change management at times. And so with that, let me just bring in our guest for today. My guest is Tiago Reis Marques. Dr. Marques is a psychiatrist and currently the Chief Executive Officer of PACEA Therapeutics. And so with that, welcome.
Thank you so much, Don. It's a pleasure to be here in the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I could tell you that I think that you're the only psychiatrist that I've interviewed on the show. I've done I think we're approaching now 300 interviews. And so after 300 interviews or nearly 300 interviews in life sciences, you'll be the first overall that will be a psychiatrist. So
there's always a first, and I'm sure you're going to see more and more. Yeah. Slowly, psychiatrists are starting to enter to biotech world.
Very good. So can you share a little bit about your journey? I would love to hear a little bit about, first what landed you in the field of psychiatry. What did you think that you would do? And then what brought you to PACEA? What made you what made you sort of want to focus on, the area of life sciences that you are?
It's a great question. So it's on this journey mostly, and focusing a bit about my personal and professional life. I always and decided since early on that I wanted to be a medical doctor, and I pursue it. I actually, as you can see from my accent, I'm not originally from the US. I've done my career in Europe, and after medical school, my big question is really what to do and what specialty to pursue. And there's always to those specialties that everyone is excited about, and those that are not to ones that normally medical students pursue in the first place. And psychiatry for many years has been that specialty. My view of it, although I still like cardiology and the other hot areas in medicine, I saw psychiatry as the last frontier in human knowledge, and that's mostly what drove me towards psychiatry. At the moment, we understand very well how all organs function. The lungs, the kidneys, the heart is no longer a black box. We know the mechanisms. We're fine-tuning our knowledge, but overall, and they're also more simple organs. The only organ that really differentiates us from any other mammal is the brain. The brain is multi-times more complex in the human species compared to other species. We have approximately 100 billion neurons, 100 billion glia cells to support those neurons. And when you compare with species that are closely related, we're talking still about multifold higher numbers of these cells and organized in a very different way. And that's what allows us to have complex thoughts and have dreams and able to pursue careers and personal goals and have fun and enjoy. And this is really different from the species. So I was attracted for this differentiated factor, and the fact that there was really not much that we really know about the brain. So I pursue psychiatry. I always had an interest in research. I started doing research early on my psychiatric career, and pursuing a PhD to help me understand better and systematize the way to collect data and analyze the data and publish data. The lifeblood of science is publishing data, is putting out novel data in a way that everyone can interpret and move forward. That's during my research. I specialize in brain imaging. I've started with MRI, and then I moved to PET, positron emission tomography, that allowed me to enter a more molecular way to read the brain, to look to synapse, to look to receptors. And from PET to moving from PET to psychopharmacology, they're so close together. It was almost there. I was touching psychopharmacology, so I started doing a lot of models of psychopharmacology models, and I specialize in drugs. And ultimately, what really led me to make this move from academia to biotech was the simple fact that academia is made to generate knowledge. That's the core business and the purpose and the ethos of academia, is to generate knowledge. The ethos of business is to produce something with this knowledge. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I realized that I was tired of not being able to apply everything I learned, and I wanted to translate this into something that would benefit patients. And that's when I created the company together with Professor Steinman at Stanford.
Oh, very good. I mean, it's a definitely interesting journey that you've taken. Let's talk a little bit about the company name first. We were talking about this just before we started here. So Pasithea is, my understanding is part of Greek mythology. So you might want to just help our audience understand.
It is. Pasithea was a female god, not from the high ranks of the Greek mythology, but one minor god. She was responsible, and people would look at her because she personified altered states of mind. So when people have delusions or hallucinations or anything that would alter the state of mind, that was a personification of Pasithea. She was married to Hypnos, the god of sleep, and I think everyone knows about Hypnos. And coin hypnotherapy and companies as well, and so many products. And Pasithea is his wife, and to one that Greek used to look when they were mentally unstable.
Could you explain a little bit about what Pasithea, what sort of products you're creating at Pasithea Therapeutics, and kind of the foundations of what you're going after?
Of course, we are a CNS focused company. So at this moment, and we as I was mentioning, I created this company with Professor Steinman at Stanford, and he's a neurologist, so we complement each other very well. Me being a psychiatrist, him being a neurologist. He's also a biotech entrepreneur. He co-founded Neurocrine and was the board of directors of Centocor until it was sold to J&J. But most importantly, on his career, he developed a drug. He was instrumental in the discovery of a mechanism of action of an alpha-4 beta-1 integrin that is called natalizumab for the treatment of MS. Tysabri was the drug that came out of this mechanism of illness, and it was for many years a blockbuster and one of the first disease-modifying therapies. At Pasithea, we're trying to identify similar drugs and similar mechanism of action that can have a huge impact in one of the most relevant and important unmet needs in the space of CNS. So we are a very science-focused company. We currently have 3 drugs in our pipeline in a very balanced approach between having totally new drugs targeting novel mechanism of action, and we have one drug that is based on my research at the drug discovery stage targeting complement C4 protein, and that's for the treatment of schizophrenia. Then we have an alpha-5 beta-1 integrin for the treatment of ALS. That's a monoclonal antibody that we're advancing for the treatment of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That, as you know, is a huge unmet need and a devastating disorder. And finally, we have our lead program. And our lead program is a MEK inhibitor. MEK inhibitors are well-known class of drugs with a very broad potential, mostly used for cancers, for the treatment of cancer. But actually, they've also used for the treatment of what we call rasopathies, disorder where the MAPK pathway is impacted. And we're going after one of these rare disorders called Neurofibromatosis type 1. Is a disorder that is affecting approximately 100,000 patients in the US, and where patients develop a syndrome of a complex syndrome of symptoms, including one that is benign tumors growing in the body. And we're using this MEK drug for the treatment of this disorder. There's already one drug approved. We think that we have the best in-class MEK drug. So this de-risk a lot of our program, because we know already that these drugs have efficacy, and we think we have the best one of them. And we're going to go after and help patients with this disorder to relieve their symptoms, to improve, because currently the drugs that exist are a benefit, but there's still a lot of partial responders, a lot of side effects. And I think a better drug will definitely support these patients and help the neurofibromatosis type 1 community.
Yeah, it's I've known one person who's afflicted with that as well, and it's just devastating as well. And then one of the nicest people on the planet that I've ever known had ALS, and it's so horrible to watch, how it sort of crumbles the human being that was there slowly over time, and large parts of them are still there. I mean, they're mentally, they're still there. There's just a lot of failures all around.
And this is almost the negative side of ALS, contrary to dementia, for example. Mm-hmm. With dementia, you also see slowly a deterioration of the mind and also the body. But people are it's very hard to see. But internally, people are definitely losing their memory, losing their ability to sense the world, understand the world. With ALS is different. Is the cruelty of this disorder is that it leaves intact your mind. Mm-hmm. So your body slowly deteriorates from a motor function perspective, and you stop being able to move and even breathe and swallow. But your mind, and you end up in a lock-in situation, but your mind is still there. So these are 10 unmet needs in CNS disorders, and this is what we're going after. It's huge unmet needs. That's what brings our passion. That's what we're looking after, and that's what we're working really hard to help these patients.
And you have such an amazing pipeline as well. So I mean, it just to hear all of the things that are there is just amazing in terms of the impact that Pasithea can have, as well.
Yes, and I think one differentiation factor, and I'm talking about our company, but also of other CNS companies nowadays, is that we stopped being. We're entering a world of precision biology and precision psychiatry, where we're targeting and developing drugs not only for all type of patients. We're specifying, we're subtyping the disease according to different mechanism of illness, according to the neurobiology, and we're subtyping the disorders more and more. And this has happened, for example, in cancer. There's no drugs for breast cancer. There's drugs for breast cancers who are estrogen positive or any other biomarker, and we're entering that world into CNS. So we're going to be able to subtype and identify based on specified biomarkers and develop drugs to treat this patient population. We're seeing this approach in ALS. This is what we're trying to do at Pasithea, is really understand very well the neurobiology of illness and develop drugs that target the underlying defects that is present in these disorders.
Very good. As I think about your history, right? So you were a clinical fellow at Imperial College, London, and then also a lecturer at IOPNN King's College, London. How have those experiences not only shaped your view of psychiatry, but also how you approach being a CEO and co-founder at Pasithea?
Well, definitely from a view of psychiatry, particularly the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College is one of the largest academic centers in the world, together with Harvard. These are the centers that publish more with higher quality in psychiatry. The leaps in psychiatry comes a lot from these centers. Is really the understanding that there's a massive shift in psychiatry research from just a perspective of understanding the mind, how cognitions work, to really understand how the brain works. The brain as an organ, the brain as a collection of neurons that communicate between themselves in various ways, and understanding what is wrong in disease biology. And this has shaped me tremendously of this new world, a new era of molecular psychiatry, that has happened mostly in the last 20, 30 years. And where you see it in these centers is really the most advanced research happening at the moment. It shaped me a lot of my view of psychiatry and how I understand brain disorders. And of course, working in large academic centers, the ability to work within teams that have different expertise and very specialized expertise between also people with experience in different areas such as AI or brain imaging or statistics or computer psychiatry. Nowadays, there's a lot of this modeling of the brain in happening in computers. So there's a new field of computer that is entering and helping our understanding of the brain. This has helped me to work with people with different expertise. It helped me to manage large teams and helped me above all to set up objectives, pursue them in a timely and efficient manner. And this I translate immediately to my work as a CEO of Pasithea.
Very good. And then whenever I would also think that given all of your own research, in addition to just the exposure that you've had about throughout your career, to others' research as well. Can you just discuss, project or study that you've worked on that you feel like is most impactful?
Definitely, and there's different ways to assess impacts. I would say that one of the most interesting studies that I work was a moment that I together with a professor called Kshitish Kapoor, we applied for a big research grant, and we got it from the Medical Research Council in the UK to look for an enzyme called PDE10, phosphodiesterase 10. PDE's phosphodiesterase has been of particular interest in the field of biotech since Viagra targeting PDE5, and now more recently drugs also targeting PDE4. There's always a big interest in this space of the phosphodiesterase, and we wanted to look to phosphodiesterase 10 in the brain of patients with schizophrenia, because there was a lot of pharma companies thinking on advancing PDE10 drugs for the treatment of this disorder. We developed a radio tracer targeting PDE10. We studied PDE10 on these patients. We ultimately not only looked to PDE10 in schizophrenia, but we also looked in Huntington, in Parkinson's disease, every disorder where dopamine is involved, because ultimately PDE10 modulates the production of dopamine. But the impact came from a moment that we were contacted by a geneticist that identified two cohorts, one in Pakistan and one in Holland, with kids with an hyperkinetic movement disorder, where he saw a mutation on phosphodiesterase 10, but he could not show that PDE10 was lower. So we ultimately scanned these patients. We show a reduction of PDE10, and we characterize a new hyperkinetic movement disorder that starts to show up in infants. Very rare. There's only two cohorts of patients affected by this. But I think the impact of being able to identify a new disorder was massive from my own personal perspective, because I know that ultimately I help some human beings, and there are some families that came to an understanding what was happening with their kids.
Very good. Not to put you on the spot, but we do have a comment that came in. Let me just bring it into the podcast here. So can you talk about your company's therapeutic effect of inhibiting NF1?
It's a great question. We have a MAC drug, and we're advancing for a specific type of symptom that happens in NF1, that is the plexiform neurofibroma. Approximately 30 to 50% of patients with NF1 develop plexiform neurofibromas. These are benign tumors that arise around to nerve sheets, and they can show up anywhere in the brain. They can show up at a very early age. They're very impactful because if they grow, they can cause pain, impact a lot the quality of life of these patients. And we know since for some years now that these plexiform neurofibromas respond to MAC drugs, and there's one MAC drug approved called Solugo, marketed by AstraZeneca, and impact around 40% of patients with plexiform neurofibroma, and ultimately reduce and improve these symptoms. So, answering the questions, we're not NF1 is a genetic disorder where there is multiple symptoms. Our drug is not inhibiting NF1 per se, is inhibiting the plexiform neurofibromas that arise in NF1, and we think that we have a best-in-class drug, meaning we're going to be able to suppress phospho-ERK for longer, have potentially, hopefully, have better clinical outcomes, less side effects. This is what we're trying to do, because we know that MAC work in plexiform neurofibromas, and we just hope that we have a better response than existing ones.
Well, thank you for letting me put you on the spot a little bit as I'm watching, questions come in. I just wanted to bring that one in and see if we could get an answer. This individual had entered in 3 different questions, so thank you very much for answering that. Last few questions of the interview here. So the first question is, what's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Well, it's a great question. I wouldn't say that I have an advice, but definitely I had role models, and I had the best thing is I saw great leaders in action, and the best I've seen was leadership by example. and kindness. And I've worked particularly with the dean of King's College nowadays, the principal of King's College, and I work under him for some years. And his knowledge, his ability to understand the brain, and his kindness to others was something that guided me as the best leadership role that you might have. And kindness doesn't mean to be soft. You can be hard, but you still can be kind. And knowledge allows you to not give orders, but just give suggestions, and they're always going to be taken for sure, because they're based on actual understanding of how things work.
Very good. What inspires you?
Helping others. Definitely, that's been my purpose all my life, and this is what I'm trying to do as a CEO, and inspires me the ability to reach the end of my career and understand that I've done good for the sake of others.
Very good. What concerns you?
The world in itself, to climate change, hunger, the inability of the human species to understand that we are all the same, and we live in this marble, in this large universe, and we better understand each other and treat each other correctly.
Absolutely. Last question. What excites you?
A lot of things. I'm a very curious person, so everything around me, from nature to science to people, I have infinite sources of inspiration around the world, but mostly people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Dr. Tiago Reis Marques, thank you for coming on the Life Science Success podcast and for telling us about Pasithea Therapeutics and all the things that you're working on. Again, just an amazing pipeline, and I really appreciated our conversation.
Thank you so much, Don. It was a pleasure to be here with you and everyone who's listening to us.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.